another principle of hermeneutics called context. Context is king. It is really the most important principle of hermeneutics that you need to learn to apply. Most mistakes in interpretation are made because people do not take the context into account. Now, what I mean by context is where the verse that you're looking at finds itself. The passage that you're looking at, there's the immediate context, the verses just above and below. There's the near context, the passages around it, the chapters around it, the book that it's in. There's the far context, the part of scripture that it's in. And as we looked at genre and things like that, you always want to make sure you understand what's happening around the passage that you're interpreting. For example, if you are standing on a bridge and you can't see the water underneath you, but you can see the water on the one side of the bridge is flowing a certain direction, and the water on the other side of the bridge is flowing the same direction, well then it's going to help you determine what's happening directly under the bridge, right? So if you're looking at a passage in scripture, let me use the example of Luke chapter 10:19, where Jesus says, "Behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you." Now, sometimes people look at just that verse and they say, there you go. Christians have the ability to stand on snakes and not be bitten. Tread on serpents. That's the authority that we have. And some take this quite far and quite literally, and they do snake handling in their churches. And usually snake handling churches have people missing digits, people who have actually died from snake bites. And then you have to explain that, well, the person didn't have faith in that verse. Well, hold on a second. That's not what that verse is talking about. And the way you know is by looking at the immediate context. The 72 disciples of Jesus were sent out. One of the things that they were charged with doing is casting out demons. And Jesus gave them that supernatural power, that authority, that ability for during that time. The verse just above, Jesus says, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." And the verse above that says, "The 72 returned with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name." And even after the phrase, "I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions," Jesus goes on to say, "and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you." So the context is clearly speaking about scorpions and serpents, referring to, metaphorically, symbolically, referring to demons and Satan. This makes sense because of the far context as well. Satan is the serpent in the garden. In the book of Genesis, Satan is identified with the serpent. And in the book of Revelation, he is called Satan, the devil, the serpent of old. So we know that this is symbolic. So you would never apply this to mean that a Christian can go and actually touch a snake. So that's one example with the context. Whenever somebody brings you a verse and says, look what this verse says, you always want to read the verses above, the verses below, the book that it's in. Make sure that you understand the context. One that we've looked at in the past is where people say, well, God says, "I have plans to prosper you, not plans for harm." And we had to look, well, in the context, the long-term plan for Israel was prosperity, so they should take hope during the judgment that they're in for their disobedience. So again, you need to look at the context. Now, once you've got the context and you've applied some of your hermeneutical principles, the temptation is to go direct to application. Remember, you always want to start, before you start applying a verse to yourself, you want to remember, how did the original readers read this? What did they understand? How was it applied in their context? You can't take certain verses and apply them directly to you without looking to whom they were written. So, for example, you can't look at a command that says, leave your country and go north, and say, okay, well, I have to leave my country and I have to immigrate to Canada, or if I'm in Canada, to Greenland, or wherever is north of me. No, look, that was a command given to Abraham to do. It has no direct application to anyone else except Abraham. Now, there's other applications you can draw from that once you've determined that the command was to Abraham. For example, that we should obey God even when it's scary, even when we don't know how he's going to provide for us, that we should trust him. and that if he gives us a command, we must obey it, just like Abraham did. Another example is that you need to look at the genre, as we've said, that the book is in. And like where Moses parts the Red Sea and the people walk through the Red Sea, that does not mean that Christians are able to part the Red Sea. This is a common mistake people make. They read that the apostles could do all sorts of miracles, and they say, therefore, Christians can do all sorts of miracles. But they never try to part the Red Sea and apply that verse directly to themselves. So they're being inconsistent there. So those powers were given to the apostles in their context for their mission, and God could do that again, but there's no command that says that he has. As I said with the casting out of demons, for example, there's only one passage in the New Testament that tells us about spiritual warfare and what to do about it, instructions to do it, and it doesn't mention casting demons out or talking to them at all. It's Ephesians chapter 6, talking about the spiritual armor of God. So you want to look at instructions in Scripture completely differently to descriptions in Scripture. We would say it this way. There's a big difference between something being descriptive and it being prescriptive. And if you just apply that principle, it's going to help you a lot. Is what you're reading descriptive of something that happened, something that God did, something that those people did, something that he said to them? Or is it prescriptive? Like Ephesians 6, where Paul says, you must put on, as a Christian, you must put on the armor of God. And even that, you start off with, well, who's Paul talking to? In the book of Ephesians, he's writing to Christians in Ephesus. So all the commands in Ephesians that are addressed to them were applicable primarily to them. The next step is for you to see, how does this apply to me? Well, surely if the instruction Paul is giving Christians on how to deal with spiritual warfare is laid out there, the Christians in Ephesus, well, we deal with the same issues today, and so we need to apply that prescription today as well. There's many, many more examples, and there's other principles, and there's much more to talk about, but for a little course in hermeneutics, I hope that this has been helpful to you. God bless.